Okay, I am back and we are going to be delving right into the awesome types of haircuts we have. One of my personal favorites, because this is a trend now, is the blunt haircut. If you've ever seen this is the cut that's straight across. Typically people wear them to a specific length. If you watch The Housewives of Beverly Hills, you will know that Dorit is famous for wearing this cut. Also know that a lot of celebrities will have a variation of this cut, so they'll have a blunt cut, but they'll use the curling wand or the beach waver to just kind of add some texture in there. It can create a lob, a bob, all that. This is also known as a bob, one length, one level, page boy, or bowl haircut. Bowl haircut is not a term that you ever want to use in the salon. It'll probably make your client scream. It's a classic haircut. The line of the cut appears to be simple. The success of the cut relies on precision, which can be anything but simple when working with a variety of hair types. What that means is if you're doing precision cutting was all about angles, straight lines. Vidal Sassoon revolutionized that. Then we go into the early 2000s where people wanted texture. It was all about texturization. It was disconnection, which is breaking all these rules that we learned. It's a very advanced technique that even I struggle with. You also want to know the client's head should be upright and straight for this cut. If you tilt the head forward, the hair will not fall into natural position and you won't get a blunt cut, you'll get something else. So if you have a client that's going like this and you're trying to cut like this, you're going to cut this side and this side and they're going to look like a version of Sia gone wrong. If you cut a blunt haircut with the head forward, you'll make two discoveries. The line will not fall as you cut it. You will have created some graduation where you did not intend to. Blunt cuts are performed by holding the sections between the fingers or using a comb to hold the hair. Some stylists I've seen just go straight across the scissors. If you've been used to that, you can try that on your mannequin. For very long hair, it's useful to have the client stand while you sit on a cutting stool as you work, because that will strain your back from having to bend like that if you don't have a chair that will go high enough. You want to be aware of the crown area, sometimes called the danger zone, because with the regular growth patterns, you'll get some nasty surprises. Look at the scalp to see the natural growth pattern. You may want to cut this area at the very end of the haircut or slightly longer than the guideline, because if you cut it too short, it'll bob up and stick out. Once the hair is dry, you can see where it falls and then match the length of the guideline. Also make sure you do have a pair of dry cutting shears that come in handy, because you actually can do haircuts in dry and there's no surprises with that. So you want to make sure you're careful around the ears again. They could be designed, blunt cuts can be designed with or without bangs, on straight or curly hair, and with a short, medium, or long length. So they give you some tips here. Pretty much summarize what I said. There's other types of blunt cuts. The A-line bob is a diagonal line cut finger angle. So you're gonna cut this as a diagonal using a special finger angle as opposed to like this. It'll be like that, almost like an A. In the longer blunt cut, the bang is left long and cut with the horizontal finger angle. They give you an example, and that's the cut that's like this. The hair is long and straight across, but the bangs are like that. That's the example they give. They give you a blunt cut on curly hair, which tends to have more texture because of the natural curls. And in a classic page boy, the perimeter is curved using a combination of horizontal and curved lines. So the graduated 45-degree haircut, in this haircut you'll be working with a vertical cutting line and a 45-degree elevation, so it'll be, that's a 45-degree angle. That's 90-degree, and that would be 180 because you're pulling up. So that's 45 degrees, it's a slant. You will use the center part. Keep in mind that this haircut can also work with side part or a bang. You'll be using a stationary guide and a traveling guideline. Remember that a stationary guideline is a guideline that does not move. All other sections are combed toward the guideline and are cut to match it. Traveling guideline moves when you cut. They give you the example of how to understand what the cut will look like. They say take a telephone book, if you even have a phone book, or just take your Cos book and just or a floppier book. Practice holding it so the page is open like that and it's like a curve. That's what it should look like. Straight or blunt, if you just hold the book like by the spine where it's straight, that's how a straight cut should hang. That just gives you a visual. I know some people find that confusing. There was another type of graduated haircut with different cutting angles, and the classic graduated bob made popular by Vidal Sassoon. Diagonal sections and finger angles are used to create rounded or beveled effects. The haircut begins in the back using a 45-degree elevation throughout and gradually incorporates the sides and top. If you find that the hairline grows up or toward the center, you can use the scissor over comb technique to blend it. You can also see that they give you an example of a shorter shape having more of a rounded weight. They created that by using diagonal partings that connect to the back of the ear. If you're not careful with this cut, it almost looks like a helmet. So some tips for graduated haircuts. Heavier graduated haircuts, those that cut with a lower elevation, work well on dry hair that tends to expand when dry. Work well on hair that tends to expand when dry. Coarse textures and curly hair will appear to graduate more than straight hair. Keep your elevation below 45 degrees when working with these hair types. Fine hair is great for graduation because graduation builds weight. You can make thin or fine hair appear thicker and fuller. However, if hair is both fine and thin, avoid creating heavy weight lines. Softer graduation using diagonal partings will create softer weight line. If the hair has medium density but is fine in texture, it is safe to elevate more because there is enough density to support it. What that means is if there's not enough density, it won't be able to hold its own weight and it just collapses. You need enough weight in the hair to actually build up on itself. So the uniform layered 90-degree haircut, it's a third basic haircut and it's created with uniform layers. The hair is elevated 90 degrees from the scalp and cut at the same length. Your guideline for this haircut has an interior guideline. Your interior guideline is the inside of the haircut rather than on the perimeter. The resulting shape will appear soft and rounded with no built-up weight or corners. The perimeter of the hair will fall softly because the vertical sections in the interior produce weight. Some examples of this haircut are the pixie, crow, and Caesar haircut, which can flatter both men and women. You can also change this a little bit when making a men's haircut. You can also create the shag, and the shag is a layered haircut with longer perimeter lengths by cutting the top area the same as you do for uniform layers, but then elevating the sides and back sections straight up for a 180-degree cut. That blends them into the top length. So what you're doing is you're taking this and pulling it up, and that creates a long layered effect, and that gives you almost like a Sally shag. For the long layered haircut, you will use increased layering, which features progressively long layers. Your guide is an interior guide beginning at the top of the head. All remaining hair will be elevated up 180 degrees to match the guide. So that's the 180-degree haircut, long layers. That's you're pulling up and pulling up and pulling up. So if I cut my guideline right up top here, I'm pulling up to that, and then that will give me long layers. So it'll create shorter ones on the top, and it progresses into longer. People were trying to do that with the horrible YouTube challenge of holding the hair straight in a ponytail and cutting across. That does not do that. That creates something horrific. Also know that we do not typically name haircuts anymore. We used to be good at naming haircuts, like there was a Dorothy Hamill, the Nancy Kwan, things like that. We just call them by their name, like Lob or Wavy Bob, things like that. That kind of fell out of fashion the last few years because there's so much technology. Let me take a quick break and I'll be right back. Sorry about that, I had an emergency phone call, but anyhow, we left right off at the tips for layered haircuts, and then we're going to go into cutting curly hair. So just take a look at some of the tips for layered haircuts. They're pretty much the same as a lot of the other tips. There's a repetitive theme, but what it's telling you is that you're supposed to get the basic concepts that ideally you want to cut the hair a little bit longer than you intend to, especially on curly hair, wavy hair. This one was pretty cool for layered haircuts because it says coarse hair tends to stick out if cut shorter than 3 inches. This hair texture needs the extra length to hold it down because what happens is when hair grows out, depending on the texture of the hair will actually stretch because of gravity. So you always want to cut curly wavy hair a little bit longer because if you go too short, it's going to poof up and poof out. So in this cut, you also might want to work with a thinning or blending shear just to kind of make sure everything melds together. So there's other techniques involved. They give you a section cutting curly hair. Obviously curl patterns range. So on a whole head of hair, someone might have a tighter curl pattern in the back, front, and so on and so forth. Different curl patterns. That's something to be aware of because if you're cutting one area short, you might have to go a little bit longer on top if it's curlier because it'll look like a poodle if you don't do that. You also want to know how curly hair behaves when cut dry versus cut wet. Take classes on that. Dry cutting is very important too. So they give you some examples. They did the blunt technique in the book, and even though the hair was not elevated, it appears graduated because of the volume you'll get when you cut curly hair. That's something you have to be very mindful of when you're working with it. Know that a lot of hair designs, they give you the example of men's hair design. It's like a box. It's like 2 boxes here and a box here. That's how you design for men's hair. Read the tips for cutting curly hair. Know that it can shrink 1/4 of an inch to up to 1 inch when wet. Cutting the bang or fringe. Know that a lot of our hair history comes from England, so that's why the word fringe is used. In England they call it the fringe, not the bang. They mean the same thing. It includes the hair area that's right here between the eyes. It's like a triangle shape. You want to work with the natural distribution, where and how the hair is moved over the head when locating the bang area. Every head is different, and you want to make sure that you cut only the hair that falls in the area. Otherwise you'll end up with short pieces falling where they don't belong. When creating bangs, you do not always need to cut all of the hair in this area, but only need to cut more if you're blending on top or the sides. This also depends on the haircut. Some people only cut around here, others will cut internally if they're trying to get some texture. Also matters on how you're going to style the hair. So they give you some different ways. They give you a layered bang cut, a short carved bang cut. They give you all these really good pictures, so just become familiar with that. Do some research, kind of know some different fashions of creating bangs. So also know that depending on the haircut, a bang can be blended or not. If you're working with a blunt haircut and the bang is one length, you do not blend. If you're working with layer or graduation shapes, you will blend the bang. Sometimes only a few pieces are cut in the bang area, which keeps the hair out of the face. So it also depends on the cut. If you're doing wispy bangs for like a fashion cut, you're only going to be cutting a few pieces to get some nice texture in there. So on to razor cutting. Now razor cutting is a lot different than other hair techniques. It also changes the hair. If you think of a shear, right? A shear is going to go through and it will cut one straight line. A bang, on the other hand, is going to give you more of a slant. I mean, a razor cut will give you more of a slant. So a haircut with a shear, straight across. Razor, slant. That changes the hair's texture. It might feel a little bit different. I also never, if you have hair that has been relaxed with a chemical relaxer, hair that has been permed with thioperm, or really damaged or bleached, do not go for the razor, because there's actually videos of people getting perms and they razor cut it and the hair looks super fried after and frizzed because of how it changes the hair. So razor will give the hair a softer appearance than a shear cut. It's a great option when working with medium to fine hair textures. Razors are always cut at an angle, so the ends will be angled. This produces softer shapes with more visible separation or feathered effect. With the razor, there is only one blade cutting the hair, and it is a much finer blade than the shears. With shears, there are 2 blades that close on the hair, creating blunted ends. So you always want to check with your instructor, make sure that you can use the razor. Discard the blade after it's dull. Always use a guard when working. Keep the hair wet. If you cut dry hair with a razor, it'll make the hair frizz and pull the client's hair. I was witnessed behind the chair once a stylist that gave a client a technique that he just learned, which is a no-no. And she had beautiful long hair, highlighted, and mind you, after you highlight someone's hair, you don't want a razor cut. He did it like this. She almost had a heart attack. She actually called up crying and bawling. And then the owner at the time decided to offer free hair extensions that were clip-ins, and the lady was so traumatized she never came back. That's what happens if you cut wrong, or if you do an experimental haircut that is not compatible with the hair. Typically, and what I'll find is that a lot of the clients that I have, because I'm a colorist, they come in and they don't want to cut their hair, they want to cut like very little, so you have to always respect that. Know that the coarse, wiry, curly, or damaged hair is not suitable for razor cuts. They make the hair frizzier. Fine and medium hair textures in good conditions are only suitable for razor cuts. There's 2 commonly used methods for cutting with a razor. I'll be honest, the most commonly used one, we're holding it at an angle and we're going like this because it's 45-degree angle. Usually too, with the razor, it should be sharp enough just to go like this, press, and it goes right through and you remove the hair, press. A lot of students will scrape like this, and that is not the appropriate way to razor because you're going to create a horrible damage to the hair that way. So press right through. They also tell you that you can go on an angle like this. So those are the two most commonly used methods. You do not want to take the razor and just go like that because that does not work. You'll lose control and possibly cut yourself or damage the hair. And now we're going to talk about some techniques that they use in hair. One of them is slide cutting. Slide cutting is a method of cutting or thinning the hair in which the fingers and shears glide along the edges of the hair to remove length. It is useful for removing length, blending shorter lengths to longer lengths, and texturizing. Slide cutting is a perfect way to layer very long hair and keep weight at the perimeter. Rather than opening and closing the shears, you keep them partially open as you slide along the edge of the section. This technique should only be performed in wet hair and with very sharp shears. And there's two ways of doing this. In one method, you hold the subsection with tension beyond the cutting line, and the other method, you place your shear on top of your knuckles and then use both hands to move simultaneously out the length to the ends. So with this one, let's see. Scissor over comb is the next one. The scissor over comb technique, it's actually a barbering technique that blended into cosmetology. This one, you hold the hair in place with a comb while using the tips of the shears to remove length. It's used to create very short tapers and allow you to cut from extremely short length to longer length. In most cases, you start at the hairline and work your way up to the longer lengths. It is best to use this technique on dry hair because then you can see exactly how much hair you were cutting, and that helps to maintain control. You do not want to hold the hair between your fingers. Let the shears and the comb move simultaneously up the head. It is important that one blade stays still and remain parallel to the spine of the comb as you move your thumb blade close to the shears. Try to cut with an even rhythm. Stopping the motion could cause steps or visible weight lines in the hair, also called holes sometimes. Practice moving the comb and scissor simultaneously. Keep the bottom of the blade still and opening and closing the shears with your thumb. So read the description on how to perform that. Practice on your mannequin because I know that the writing is very hard to understand for a lot of you, so make sure you watch videos on YouTube that show you the technique. On to texturizing. So actually what I'll do here is, because I know we're getting close to that 17-18 minute mark, I'm going to stop here. I'm going to talk about texturizing techniques, and then I'm going to go and then talk about clipper techniques, and that should be it for the chapter.